What is up, everybody? We are back at it again. We're doing some college football with somebody new today. It's not Kevin. It's the one and only Caden Miller. Caden, how you doing today?
Good, Jack. Just got back from Sweet at the Delta Center, so I'm feeling pretty good today. Got some good hot dogs for the dinner, so I'm happy to talk some college football.
Yo, we saw Cougs win against a bad Cal Baptist team, but um, glad you were there cheering them on. But like you said, we're gonna hop right into college football rather than basketball today. Just kind of talking about the committee, the whole ranking system, all that fun stuff. So we'll have a really good show with Caden today. And the first question I want to ask you is there a reason we should be doing a preseason ranking at this point?
Yeah, that's a great question. I go back and forth. I think it's still important. I mean, I just don't think they'll ever go away from it. So I don't know if the discussion can be had to get rid of it because the TV deals need there to be ranked teams at the start of the year for the games to be interesting. Um, no matter what anyone thinks about it, we love so much to see that number by your team, um, anywhere from 1 to 25 in college football, basketball as well. But talking football, I just don't think it's possible to get rid of it. Um, and now, as far as the conversation goes, as to how that factors in to the strength of schedule at the end of the year when we're determining who should be put in the playoffs, maybe that's another conversation. But I think it needs to be kept in some capacity.
No, for sure. I definitely agree with that. I mean, there's just so much riding on those preseason rankings, though. I mean, we look at
Hmm.
teams like Penn State, who was the number two team in the nation to start this season, and how far they've dropped off. And then you got teams like Florida State, who didn't even finish 500, that were in the top 10 at some point in the season. And so, I mean, you just have all these back and forth type conversations, which leads us right to where the committee's at right now, still having those back and forths from around number 9 to 14. And in your opinion, do you think they got these right? Do you think the committee is right in the way that they are putting this playoff together?
Conversation there, but that's where we're here. So I've actually been a fan of the committee for most of this year, and just in general, I don't think people might say they're terrible in any given year based on your personal bias. I don't think that's true at all. I think that they've gotten it mostly right for most of this year. However, that being said, I think there's a few areas or ranks for improvement in these most recent rankings. So, and that goes into a whole conversation, but BYU obviously is the obvious one. I think it literally should just be BYU and Notre Dame switched. If you look at their whole resumes, um, BYU has a better quality win and obviously a less bad quality loss. Um, so especially if they look decently against Texas Tech in the conference championship game, I think in theory they could be switched with Notre Dame. Um, it's just so tough. The problem with the committee, and this is definitely something I wanted to bring up as well, is that they're so big on the eye test. And the crazy thing is, if you look on the CFP selection committee page, they give the criteria. Like it's no secret in theory. Like I have it up right here. It says the committee's task will be to select the best teams, rank the teams for inclusion in the playoff, and then assign the teams to the bracket. Blah blah blah. So that's like their number one goal is to select the best teams, quote unquote. It then says the committee will select the teams using a process that this is important, that distinguishes among otherwise comparable teams by considering strength of schedule, head-to-head, comparative outcomes with common opponents, other relevant factors such as injuries, essentially, and availability of coaches, which is an interesting factor recently. But it's interesting, like, so the number one is they're looking for the best teams. And then two, they're like, okay, if there's comparable teams, which is a key word, which means like in their mind, teams are comparable, then they're going to use like maybe more specific given tiebreakers. But to get to that point, it's extremely arbitrary. They're selecting the best teams based on no specific criteria. And there's obviously some criteria they like to use, but they can use anything to justify that. So they can use margin of victory or strength of schedule or the eye test, how the quality or the talent of the players look on the field. And so I think they're putting huge weight into that. And if they're solely going off the eye test, I don't have a problem with the rankings because I do think Notre Dame looks pretty good. They have a crazy good running back, and they've looked good in their games. And Alabama, Oklahoma, those teams have talent. Like it's no lie. Texas Tech has way more talent than they crushed BYU. So based off that eye test, yes. That's, however, my argument is that we shouldn't, like, we need to have more specific criteria for this sport, because it's just opens the door to a lot of arbitrariness. So, if that's a word. So, like, I think it needs to be something along the lines of you need to be ranking teams on wins and losses and strength of record, strength of schedule as like a given criteria. And I can go a lot more into that. But I think if you go to the the fundamentals of the community itself, that's where there needs to be some change.
That actually makes a lot of sense because when you bring in 6 to 7 different criterias, you're gonna end up with this issue of everyone saying, "Oh, you're just pushing your agenda with whatever criteria fits your agenda." But if you stick to say only two specific metrics, like you're talking about, instead of saying who looks the best, you're saying you can't fight the facts. And the facts are that BYU is 11-1. The facts are that they have the sixth best strength of record. And you just can't fight those. But the more metrics and the more criteria that you add to the committee, this is where that personal belief and agenda are going to come back to bite the committee itself, but also the fan bases.
Right. Yeah. And I just think, in my mind, if you think about it, there's literally no other sport on the planet that, or league, because this is a professional league now, it's not a student thing.
Yep.
There's no other sport or league in the planet that says, okay, we're not going to factor in your wins into who gets a chance to compete for a championship. Like any other sport, it's just your wins and your losses. And so, like in my mind, win-loss record among, at least among Power Four teams, should be the number one like tiebreak or ranking mechanism. You put all your undefeated teams, you put all your one-loss teams, and sure, there's going to be a lot of tiebreakers, but like if the Power Four is all in theory has equal say and is the Power Four, that should be the number one thing is your win-loss record. Like I understand, obviously, Group of Five, like okay, James Madison has one loss, like they're not going to be ranked in the top 10. So I'm just talking about Power Four, but it's got to be something like that, and then you have your tiebreakers, your specific tiebreakers as far as like strength of record to separate the one loss teams and then the two loss teams. That's I think a change that you can make.
That's a really good point, and I feel like they need. It's almost like you just need to make it where you're ranking them based on a one massive conference when you're doing something like a playoff with a bunch of different conferences. Why don't we rank them like they're just one big conference? Why aren't we acting like these teams are just one big group, one big league? Because that's what it is. It's just one league. And in the NFL, every team isn't going to play every team every year, and it's the same thing with college football. And so you're not even going to sniff close to playing every team in the Power 4. And so that's why it needs to be more specific on a lot of different instead of using a bunch of different metrics to serve your purpose.
Yeah, like imagine if the NFC was like, oh, the AFC is trash. Like they played nobody. They shouldn't make it in the playoff, even though they have only three losses or whatever.
Right.
Like just because college football is a professional league now with a lot of money involved in paying the players and coaches, it needs to act more like a professional league and not a. And with the expansion of the playoff, which is a more set system, you can't just have a kind of an arbitrary pick the few best teams that we think, It needs to act more like a professional league.
Right. Yep, absolutely. To kind of switch gears, I want to get your thoughts on Notre Dame specifically and the way that they are perceived, especially as an independent. So what are your thoughts on Notre Dame and the way that they carry themselves as an independent team?
Yeah, I mean it is interesting that they are ranked going back to kind of my ideal system of or the system that you tied the bow on of you rank all the Power Four teams together. Um, and then you put like all the zero loss, all the one loss, and all the two loss, and you treat them as all one league. Right now, Notre Dame actually is being treated like that. And so, regardless of who is on their schedule, they're just going to be right there with all the one loss teams in the rankings, or right around the high quality teams from the other conferences, those teams that make their conference championships, right? Um, however, there's obviously the caveat that they just had a super weak schedule this year. But that being said, like they played a lot of um, Power Four teams, just happened to be like the worst Power Four teams. So in theory, they would be placed in a league with all these other Power Four, and then they'd have an evenly balanced schedule as they drew from those different teams. So I think they definitely should be encouraged to enter a Power Four league. Um, that being said, I don't know. Like, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that aspect, but they're definitely a solid team. Based on the current criteria, I have a problem with how the criteria is used, but as far as like the eye test goes, but yeah, I'm kind of up and down
Sure.
about them.
Right. I That's the thing. I mean, it's just the fact that they build their schedule by themselves. It's not the conference
Right. They don't.
building their schedule. Like, it's them building their schedule. And they do it in years in advance. So I know they're not going to say, oh, this team's going to be good next year. Let's play them. That's not how it works. But the one thought that I had with Notre Dame was, why do we treat them like a Power 4 team? Why don't we treat them like a group of five team and
Mhm.
give them that group of five spot if they end up making the playoffs? And so that was my initial thought with Notre Dame is like every year if they're not going to join a conference, either penalize them and not letting them into the playoffs because if it's all about money, you're going to make them join a conference because as an independent, they're bringing back every single penny. Nothing's going to a different school. It's going straight to Notre Dame. And so if it's about money, you're going to make them join a conference. And the punishment is they don't get to be a part of the festivities if they're not wanting to be a part of a conference. And so, I mean, I don't think it'll ever happen, but that's just a super interesting thought to have, is like, why do we keep rewarding a team that's independent if people have so many arguments about them being independent? Just make them join a conference or they don't get the reward. Yep. So my next thought is, do style points matter? Do you think watching Texas Tech win every game by 22 plus has affected the way that the conference seeded them?
Yeah, I do think that they matter. When you talk margin of victory and game control, I mean, that's essentially the one metric that a team like BYU doesn't have an argument in, is if the committee is going to use that metric. We just simply don't rank well in game control or margin of victory. I mean, decently, but um, I guess the one game that mattered was the Texas Tech loss. And then on the other side of things, teams like Texas Tech, Notre Dame, even like your Indianas, and who was obviously a great team in all aspects, but super well at game control. And I do think that it is indicative of success because, I mean, I'm sure there's stats to back this up, but the teams that blow out the mid or bad teams, or even good teams, often, I mean, they're the strongest teams. So I do think that there's stats to back up that that's a good indicator or a good metric to use. Um, I mean, I think it should be used more of a tiebreaker. Like, my idea still is, you put all the one loss teams together and you say, okay, um, how are they beating teams? That's fair. Like, that's a tiebreaker, just like how head to head, or could be used as a tiebreaker as well. If you don't have head to head, you say, okay, what's the margin of victory or game control? So that's my thought.
No, that's a really good point. And you keep bringing up BYU at 11-1, not being in that same group as the rest of the 11-1 teams like Ole Miss, and Texas A&M, and teams like that. And you've brought to my attention that BYU's ranking is something that we've never seen in the last 30 years. Is that right?
What I understand, in the past 30 years, or maybe even in the history of kind of the BCS ranking and different ranking systems, there's never been a one-loss team in a power conference ranked outside the top 10 at the end of the season. That's been going around today. I'm assuming that's what you're talking about.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. So I saw that, and even in 2015, nobody knows this team, but North Carolina was 11-1, and they were the 10th team in the country at that in 2015.
Yeah.
And BYU has outshined them, for lack of a better words, and they are now 11th at 11-1, and it seems like that's how they're going to stay unless they pull off the miracle upset on against Texas Tech, which brings us to, what is BYU's case to make it in right now? Even if they lose on a game-winning field goal by Texas Tech, what is the case for them to be in the college football playoffs? And do they have a case?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. They've got to make it close against Texas Tech. Like, again, based on the current criteria, the eye test is huge. So right now, the fair point that many of the other bubble teams bring up is BYU has not looked good against the only playoff team that they've played. In fact, they look terrible against the only playoff team they've played this year. And so if they look good against a playoff team and a top tier playoff team, then I think that helps their case a lot. Um, And then the only other thing that would help is this is just the fundamental thing the committee's doing is if they're actually reanalyzing teams' resumes every single week.
Hmm.
So what I mean by that is I think it's very fair that based on what happened like at the start of the season, you move up or down. Um, so like for example, in Alabama, like to be fair, I guess this is when it wasn't CFP, but the AP moved them down to like 23 or 24 after they moved to Florida State. I'm sure the CFP would have done the same thing. So, and then you move up marginally as you get good wins, right? And it is fair, like, let's say they lost to, like, a team lost to a ranked team at that time that team was ranked, you're not going to drop very much, even if that team ends up being pretty bad. Like, that's just fair. Like, it's not, there's no future telling, right? So the question is, in theory, should the committee reassess the quality of the resumes every week? And they've said that they do, but I don't know if there's much moving in the rankings because of that. So if the committee were to reassess BYU's position and see that their win against Arizona actually looks really good now,
Hmm.
then that could help. So obviously that's not something BYU has any control over, um, but that could help. Um, Obviously, they would have to reassess those above Notre Dame, Alabama, Oklahoma, somehow see that those resumes don't look as good, um, or the eye test isn't compared to BYU's performance on Saturday. That's the only thing that could help them. So that's definitely a case. Is one playing super well against a playoff team, and then two is if the committee really does reassess resumes every week. Um, I guess, and helped too by a huge Alabama loss,
Right.
Georgia. But
Right. I mean, if you're a BYU fan, you got to hope and pray that Georgia just blows Alabama out of the water. Alabama hasn't been playing their best football as of late. They didn't look great for about 3 quarters in that Auburn game. Squeaked out a win at Auburn. They lost to Oklahoma. They haven't been playing their best, and so if you're a BYU fan, you're going to be praying for a 30-point win for Georgia, um, and then you got to pray even harder for BYU to do something against Texas Tech. Um, and the last little quick hitter that I wanted to hit tonight, we saw Kalani get extended. He's gonna be in BYU blue for the a long time to come. So it seems. Was this the right long term coaching extension for BYU?
and only because what came with that was a large commitment to paying for his assistant coaches and to paying for NIL. If we had just extended Kalani on face value without that financial commitment, I actually don't think it would have been the right move
Hmm.
because I don't think that he's shown that he can do it by himself without resources. Because I think that Jay Hill would have been gone in a year or two if he hadn't gotten a raise. And I'm sure you remember our teams before Jay Hill, not the greatest. So NIL money like wasn't committed towards defensive players. Now it is a little bit. That's not to say that it was only Jay Hill that got BYU the success it does. I think it's a combination of the both. Um, but because Jay Hill has gotten a raise now, I mean, I know a connection that saw him and said that he looked like super happy today. So
Good.
he was just like the happiest he's ever looked, which usually he's a stoic guy. So, board man gets paid. That's you start to get a little bit happy.
It's true.
So due to that fact, I mean, I don't know how long he sticks around still, but we have the resources now to pay other assistant coaches Maybe you pay a J Hill equivalent for offensive coordinator in the future, or paying for players obviously is going to be huge because our level of players hasn't super like our recruiting classes haven't increased except for this year's. Um, and that's honestly just going to be the big difference is that level of players because we have on par coaches to many teams in the country, but with the level of players increasing, I do think, I guess to tie a bow back to Kalani, he is the right man with these good coaches and increased NIL money to attract all these players and keep them at BYU because of his personality and what he brings to the table.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And um I want to go back to the fact that you said like yeah, we have just as good as a coaching staff as a lot of the other Power 4 teams now. Um and just the thought of if Kalani were to leave, he was going to Penn State. Penn State is one of the biggest names out there in college football. And so to hear that a team like Penn State wants your coach, that means you got a pretty darn good coach. Um, and you got to trust all of his calls, assistants, any position coaches. You got to trust Kalani and know that he's getting the right guys for that job as well. And so I definitely agree with that. Kalani is the right guy for BYU. The way he carries himself is how BYU wants to carry themselves. And the last question I have for you is this Kalani extension going to affect BYU's game on Saturday at all? Or do you think the outcome is going to be the outcome regardless of all the off-field drama?
I don't think it would have. I think it would have affected if he left, for sure.
Sure.
Um, I don't think it's gonna bump. It's not gonna be a huge bump to BYU's play.
It's not like
Um,
juicing the players up or anything like that.
no, maybe slightly, but I don't
Sure.
think they're too read into those factors. So they're kind of just out there to play. Um, so outcome is what it's gonna be. I think BYU will definitely make it closer than last game. Everything went wrong that could last game, so you hope a law of averages helps us out. But I don't know what the final result will be. We'll see.
Okay, we'll do some quick hitters for the championship weekend. Ohio State, Indiana. Who you got?
I got Indiana actually in that one.
Whoa! So they're gonna take the first spot. I'm gonna take Ohio State. I just think they're too good. Next up we got Georgia, Alabama.
I got Georgia, but it'll be close. We're not going to get the blowout we want for as a BYU perspective,
Okay. So does Alabama stay in the field?
for sure. Yeah.
Okay. And then we got Duke, Virginia. We gonna see some
I got
chaos?
Virginia.
No
Unfortunately,
chaos?
not. I'd love to see Duke or James Madison or Troy in the playoffs, but it'll be Virginia.
Virginia's gonna take it. Okay. I'm gonna say Duke, just to cause the chaos. I think Duke's gonna pull it off, and we're just gonna have complete chaos in the playoffs this year. And then lastly, BYU, Texas Tech. Who do you got?
BYU fans out there, but I got Texas Tech by 10.
By 10. Low scoring.
Like in the 20s.
So
Maybe
like
something like 28-18,
okay, okay.
27-17.
That's respect. I think BYU keeps it within a score, but I don't think it's gonna be that close than the scoreboard is gonna say. But I think the Texas Tech defense is just too strong for the high power freshman offense. So, but that's all I got for you. Any other thoughts before we log off, Cease?
That's everything football wise that I wanted to share. Just shout out to Jack and Kevin for their hard work on JK Sports. I'm grateful to be on.
All right, man. Well, we appreciate you taking the time to hop on, talk some college football with us. Um, and you're always invited on the cast, so we appreciate you.
Come on and beef with our friend Adam for his NBA takes because they're pretty bad. So
Hey, if you want to hear some NBA talk, we hopped on the mic with Adam earlier today. Both of these are going to be posted on YouTube, wherever you get your podcast, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, stuff like that. So, but yeah, we'll log off. It's good to talk to you, man. Have a good one.
yeah, you too. Have a good one, Jack.